So here we go. I'm going to give you a little introduction, then we're going to go through about 90 slides that deal with Quartz Creek and Taylor Park and the Alpine Tunnel and the area right around here. So we're going to start off with the Ute Indians who were in this area first. And there are three branches of them, and we had the Uncompahgre Utes in the Gunnison country, and there were about 3,000 of them. And very early, in 1868, they were moved out of the San Luis Valley and came to an Indian reservation called Los Pinos, not very far from Cochito Pass. And in that year, the Gunnison Cow Camp was established right where the 13th green is on the present Dos Rios Golf Course. Dos Rios meaning two rivers. Tamichi and the Gunnison come together right there. And that is where Alonzo Hartman rode in on Christmas Day in a driving blizzard in 1872 to take care of the cow camp. The Ute Indians were eventually moved out of Colorado in 4 treaties, and they were moved out of the western slope in 1873 by the Bruneau Treaty, taken out to Kelowna, about 12 miles south of Montrose, and from there 6 years later moved out to Utah. The southern Utes still exist around Durango and Pagosa Springs. So they are the original people in the area. But they had one major problem. They lived on land that white farmers and white miners wanted very badly. And that was the reason that they were moved out. The second group of people who came in here, if we have a little litany of folks coming into the Gunnison country, were the Spanish. And Spain was in here because if you had gold around the Sierra Madre in Mexico and South America, certainly you ought to have gold in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. So in they came, and they were trying for 2 things. Number 1, obviously, they were looking for gold. And number 2, they were looking for a good trail between their mission stations of Taos and Santa Fe, New Mexico, to tie up with their mission stations out in California. 24 of them, from San Diego to San Francisco along a great road called the El Camino Real, which means the Royal Road. And every one of those mission stations was 1 day's ride apart. So we know them today as San Diego, LA, San Francisco, Santa Barbara, Santa Catalina, Santa Monica, and so on. 24 of them. Spain never found gold, had trouble with the Indians, never had a permanent settlement in Colorado with the Gunnison country, and they were out of here pretty much by the year 1800. The next group of people on our litany as we follow folks into the Gunnison country were the mountain men. In the year 1806, Lewis and Clark came back from exploring the northern area of the Louisiana Purchase Territory. We had bought that for $15 million from France in 1803. If we bought it, we got to find out what's out there. So Lewis and Clark went all the way out into Oregon in the northern area, looking over the area that we had bought. 1 year later, Zebulon Pike returned after his trip exploring the southern area of the Louisiana Purchase Territory and coming into what today is Colorado. The interesting thing about both of their expeditions is that both had a line in their report that went like this: the mountains are teeming with beaver. And as a result, in St. Louis in 1807, following Pike coming back, every Tom, Dick, and Harry lined up at St. Louis to go out west to trap the beaver or black gold. Each beaver pelt sold for $7. That is like $700 today. So in they came, one great rendezvous point after another. And every summer the traders would get together and the trappers would get together and they'd exchange their furs and then get supplies. And they always traded in a hole in the mountains where the trapping was the best. So today we have Jackson's Hole, Wyoming, Brown's Hole, Colorado, Ogden's Hole, Utah, Pierre's Hole, Idaho. And that era lasted from 1807 to 1842. Then a guy named Beau Brummel invented the silk hat, and the price of the beaver pelt fell to $1 a pelt. And on top of that, the mountains had become very dangerous. And on top of that, they had trapped out a lot of the streams. So the fur trading frontier came to an end in 1842. And that led to the next group coming in. These are individuals coming in looking for a transcontinental railroad route. And the best route, everybody thought, from St. Louis to San Francisco, a direct route, was through the central route of the Rockies. So in 1853, about this time of the year, John W. Gunnison, Goshen, New Hampshire, member of the United States Corps of Engineers, came through here in 1853 looking for a transcontinental railroad route. When he got to the Lake Fork Canyon, and then he got to the Black Canyon, and then he got to Cirro Summit and the Blue Mesa, they referred to that area as, ladies will pardon me, son of a bitch road. And it was pretty obvious that no transcontinental railroad was going to run through terrain like that. Following Gunnison, about 3 or 4 months later, the great pathmarker of the West, John C. Fremont, came through the same route, came to the same conclusion. So the explorers didn't find the transcontinental railroad route. And that set the stage for the next group of people coming in, 1860. They were at Armstrong Gulch. They were on the Quartz Creek. They were up at Snowblind Gulch near White Pine. They were up at Dead Man's Gulch near Spring Creek, trespassing on Indian land and looking for gold. Now, these are the individual miners with the gold pan, placer miners, and they would scoop out the debris of the bottom of the stream bed and then gently rotate it slightly downhill with water flowing, carrying all the light stuff off. What's left in the bottom of the pan were little pebbles, too heavy to float out, and if you're lucky, black sand or gold, which is heavy, on the bottom of the pan. The miner would then take forceps, take the pebbles out, pour a little mercury in the bottom of the pan, mercury amalgamated with gold, and then you burn the mercury off. And what was left in the bottom of the pan was always called pay dirt, the dirt on the bottom of the pan that paid. Free gold, shot, wire, grain, flour, dust, and nugget. Pure gold, didn't need any smelting at all. Put in your saddlebags and ride away. And that decade lasted until about 1870. Now, one of the great stories is the story of Karl Warensky right in this area. Karl Warensky was Polish. He escaped a Russian ship that he was on in San Francisco in 1862. Came to Denver. Fell in with a bunch of guys going into the Rocky Mountains. Came right out here into Armstrong Gulch in the Quartz Creek area, and they did very well. And they found about $50,000 worth of gold. And as long as they had trinkets to give to the Ute Indians nearby, they were okay. But now they're running out of trinkets. And one of their men got mountain fever, and they decided they'd better get out. Warensky and 2 men were up above, looking down at the Utes to figure out what they were going to do when an attack came and killed all of his friends. Warensky and his friends made their way up. Warensky hid in the cleft of a rock. The 2 guys with him were killed. Warensky, under cover of night, made his way to Denver. Fell in with some other guys, came back, buried the bodies, but he didn't want to tell about where the $50,000 was hid. They hid it under the cleft of a rock also. When he went back to Denver, he found out that his father had died and his mother was in dire circumstances. So he went back to Poland, was arrested by the Russians as a deserter, spent 18 years in a Siberian prison, and now back in 1880, he's back at Pitkin, which had just started to find the gold. but nothing looked the same as it did in 1861. In 1861, there weren't 2,000 to 3,000 people in the area, and after looking for about 3 or 4 days, he was about ready to give up when he ran into a guy named Dutch Henry Scherenbeck, who had also been out here in 1861. With Scherenbeck helping up, he found the money, came to the Pitkin Independent newspaper, took out a subscription for 1 year, and left forever, never to be heard of again. The legend of Karl Warensky. The placer mining era is over by the year 1870. And now, in 1867, the United States federal government, wanting to find out what actually exists in the West, appropriates $150,000 for 4 surveys. And these are called the Great Surveys of the American West. We want to find out what's out here. First scientific look. When Pike and other people went through here, Gunnison, they were here for about a day, and then he passed through. So now you want to find out what the flora and the fauna looks like, what kind of mining possibilities exist. John Wesley Powell, down the Colorado River, 1869. We want to find out about all those lies that have been told. Hot water shooting out of the ground 100 feet high. Everybody knew that was a lie. Indians living in 4-story buildings in the sides of canyons. Everybody knew that was a lie. And a river running through a tremendous canyon, God knows where. We knew that was a lie. But Powell found out it wasn't in 1869. And then a man by the name of George Wheeler had an individual working for him named William Marshall, who had a bad abscess tooth in Silverton and wanted to get to Denver faster than the usual route, down around where Pueblo and Colorado Springs are today. He remembered a low depression in the mountains, crossed that low depression, even though he was suffering, took barometric readings, got to Denver 5 days earlier than he would have. His name was William Marshall. And the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad crossed Marshall Pass to get into the Gunnison country in 1881, parallel to Monarch Pass. The other individual is a fellow named Ferdinand Vanderveer Hayden, who in 1874 stood on top of Mount Teocalli outside of Crested Butte, looked at 2 mountains, called them the Crested Buttes. One of them later on more resembled a Gothic cathedral, so it became Gothic Peak, and they dropped the S off of the Buttes, Crested Butte Mountain, 1874. So these were the great surveys of the American West. And then, around the middle 1870s, came the lode miners, L-O-D-E, as in looking for the mother lode, hard rock mining, quartz mining, and towns like Silverton and Telluride and Lake City, Telluride, Silverton, and Ouray all opened up. And people from that area began to make their way into the Gunnison country, and some of them came in to right where Pitkin is today. When that happened, the day of the individual miner was over, because now you got to go deep into the bowels of the earth to find the gold and the silver and the lead and the zinc and the copper and bring it up to the top. So you need a lot of technology. You need a lot of money. You need a lot of men. And big companies now come in. Now, what they used to say was that good gold was $200 to the ton. And what that means is you take 1 ton of muck and rock and debris and bring it out of the mountain and bring it up to the top. Gold is selling at $20 an ounce at that time. Somewhere in that 1 ton of muck, rock, and debris are 10 ounces of gold times $20 an ounce equals $200 to the ton. So you can see there's a lot of debris as you get the 10 ounces out. Silver, that's what Pitkin was noted for. Lead and zinc, Zinc became very important, World War I, World War II. At White Pine, they had a big mill, didn't close till 1953. Copper became even more valuable than silver because electricity was in its infancy and we needed a lot of copper wiring. So one mine after another opens up around Pitkin in the year 1879. Now there's a great story told about the optimism of the miners. And this was told in the mining camp throughout Colorado in the West. Miner died, went to heaven. When that was told, everybody in the bar where the story is told began to snicker and laugh because no miner ever went to heaven consorting with prostitutes, drinking and gambling, but this guy had been good. And he walked up to St. Peter at the Golden Gate and he said, "Here's my pass, I want to get into heaven." St. Peter said, "Can't take you, we're booked." Miner said, "What the hell do you mean we're booked?" St. Peter said, "Don't get on me. We just had a big religious war in the Middle East and a lot of good people died and we can't take you in." Miner said, "I want to go in with a temporary pass. If I can convince anybody to come out, I'm in." St. Peter said, "Nobody has ever arbitrarily left heaven in a million years." Miner said, "Shut up and give me the pass." St. Peter thought, well, nobody's going to come out anyway, and I feel real bad about this, so he gave the miner the pass. 8 minutes later, 4,678 people streamed out of heaven, and they appeared to be in a fast hurry to leave. St. Peter grabbed the miner. He said, "What the hell did you tell those people?" And the miner said, "What do you mean, what did I tell them? I just told them there's a big gold strike down in hell." And then the miner headed away from heaven. And by this time, St. Peter is hot. And he grabs the miner and he said, "Where the hell do you think you're going?" And the miner said, "What do you mean, where do you think I'm going?" He said, "Haven't you heard? They got a big gold strike down in hell." The miner believed his own publicity. And now Pitkin gets underway, original name Quartzville, from 1879 to 80. And then they changed the name to the governor of Colorado, Frederick W. Pitkin. You name the place after the governor, you might get a little patronage. Who knows? So Pitkin's underway. And now, what's going to make this area go are railroads, and there's a big race going on between two railroads. One is the Denver and Rio Grande of William Jackson Palmer. Palmer was a Quaker from Delaware. He had fought in the Civil War. In 1869, he married Mary Queen Mellon of the Pittsburgh Steel family, went on a honeymoon to London. While he was there, he saw in the paper that Robert Fairley was going to give a talk to the British Locomotive Association, and the title of the talk was Rails of the Future. Palmer gave his wife $200, sent her shopping, went to hear the talk. Fairley talked about narrow gauge railroads, which are pretty much unknown in the U.S. And he said the advantage is they can go around sharper curves, go up steeper grades, be built with less money, and more attractive to investors. They are made for the mountains. Palmer came back, started the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. It's going to run north and south, Denver to Mexico City, tapping the mineral wealth on the west side and the farm produce on the east side. He begins building Denver in 1871. Comes to Colorado City, doesn't like it. He's a Quaker, didn't like the drinking, the gambling, and the prostitution. Starts his own town, Colorado Springs, Little London, Newport of the Rockies, for the rich. Glen Area's home, the Antlers Hotel. And then, going south, he comes to the great town of Pueblo. And he knew there that he needed coal to run a railroad. So he's one of the guys who starts the Colorado Coal and Iron Company. Later on, the CF&I. And then he hears about tremendous mineral wealth opening up in a place called Leadville. and he decides not to go south anymore but to head west. So on he comes through the Arkansas River Canyon and has to win a fight with the Santa Fe Railroad in the Royal Gorge. Comes to Salida, 1880, means exit in Spanish. July 23rd, 1880, Rio Grande arrives in Leadville, first railroad. But that's not the main line. The main line goes over Marshall Pass, into the Gunnison country. Sargents, Tamichi Creek, Gunnison, August 6, 1881. Branch line to Crested Butte, tap the coal mines there, and the main line goes to the Black Canyon. The other guy building a railroad is John Evans. Evanston, Illinois, suburb of Chicago, named for his family. He is going to build a narrow gauge rivaling Palmer, trying to get in here first. Denver, Turkey Creek Canyon, Kenosha Pass, South Park, Trout Creek Pass, Chalk Creek, and now he ascends Alpine, Romley, Hancock, St. Elmo, and now he is going to try to build the Alpine Tunnel. 10,000 people worked on the Alpine Tunnel. Many of them never lasted more than 3 weeks. Driving blizzards, 20 to 30 degree below zero temperatures, isolated, tough duty. On the east side, a little construction site called Atlantic. On the west side, construction site called Pacific. 1,771 feet long, with sheds on both sides, keeping them closed so the wind can't drive the snow in and block the railroad. When the train approached, blew the whistle, gates opened up. Now, in the old days, in the 60s, I was able to get in the Alpine Tunnel because the west side was open, a little opening about like this. And you could slide down about 20 feet and go in. Carbide lamp, hip boots, a little water down on the bottom. First time I got down there, turned my headlamp to the left, saw gigantic white algae that looked like 8-foot spider legs. I think I jumped out of the boots. You could walk all the way, 2/3 of the way through the tunnel. And there was a big slide about 1/3 from the east side. Now, one magic spot in the Alpine Tunnel, you could put 2 pieces of paper together, and one piece of paper would flow to the Atlantic, and the other would flow to the Pacific. And that was the exact continental divide, because they wanted water to run out both sides. So the Alpine Tunnel opened up 1882. Palisades, Sherrod Curve, Woodstock, Quartz, Pitkin, 1882, into Gunnison, September of 82. But as it built up Ohio Creek towards the booming town of Irwin, the boom had busted, and it never got any further than Ohio Creek. In Pitkin, investors with names like Rothschild and DuPont and Rockefeller made their way in because they thought this was going to be another Leadville. One great silver mine after another opens up. The Roosevelt, the Silver Islet, the El Capitan, and many others. And for a while, Pitkin began to boom. In 1880, 1,000 people. In 1880, a 16 by 24 tent opened up with sawdust on the bottom, and you could get in and sleep on the bottom with a little blanket over you. That first hotel in 1880 was called the Bonton. When you want to know where it is, right where you are today. That was the Bonton Hotel in the year 1880. For a while, for a couple of years, Pitkin did very well, but around 1884, the bloom was off the rose. Low-grade ore. Denver, South Park, and Pacific had a hell of a time keeping the tunnel open every winter. And then the price of silver began to fall. And the silver panic would hit in 1893. And the price of silver, which had been $1.25 an ounce, fell to 58 cents an ounce. The U.S. went off the silver standard and on to the gold standard. Nearby, about 9 miles from here, you'll see this on the slides in a moment, we had an area called Ohio City. And up Gold Creek were 4 great gold mills, and I mean great gold mills. You'll see them. Sandy Hook, Raymond, Gold Links, Carter, all great gold mines with gold mills. So right now, I'm going to shut up. We're going to go to the slides. Chad is going to be my man. And Chad, I'm going to get out of the way here and say next. There we go. We're starting off with Parlin. We're filming this thing for posterity. So here we go with Parlin. This is the water tank. Thank you. At Parlin. The Denver Rio Grande ran right through there in 1881, made a deal with John Parlin. And John Parlin owned the land. And they made a deal. Parlin would give Palmer all the land for the water tank and the depot if the train would stop for 10 minutes so he could sell milk to the customers. Next. There is the Sheridan Schoolhouse, not far from here, and that's where all the children of Parlin went to school. Next. The QT, Quartz and Tamici, post office. Next. Again. Next. Indian Head, right outside of Ohio City. Next. Ohio City with a double-header Denver South Park and Pacific train off in the distance. Next. There's Ohio City starting to boom around 1880. Next. There is July the 4th, 1893, big celebration going on in Ohio City. Next. There is an open-air card game at Ohio City, right outside the post office. Now, I was there a number of times, not that early, but once in a while when I was there, there'd be 7 guys playing poker at that table. And one guy would be caught cheating. He'd be kicked out of the game. About 5 minutes later, he comes in, sits down, and just like nothing happened, he's back in the game. Next. Ohio City, booming. Next. That is Pearl Wright. She and Joe ran the post office at Ohio City with a nice collection of fish caught by her husband. Next. There is the Belzora Bassick Mine, great gold mine area and great gold mill area right up Gold Creek, Ohio City. Next. Sandy Hook. When I told you they had big mills, that's a good example of one. Next. Sandy Hook again. Next. Sandy Hook again. Look at the size of that mill. That mill's 4 stories high. Next. Raymond Mine and Mill. Look at the size of that. They got an 8-horse team taking the ore out to the South Park Railroad. Next. Gold Links. Still thinking about mining that today. Next. Carter Mine and Mill. Next. Carter Mine and Mill. Carroll Carter said he took $1 million worth out of that mine and paid about $1 million to get it out. Next. On the road, across from the Roosevelt Mine, heading into Pitkin in the 1890s. Next. Roosevelt Mine, just out of town here by about 3 miles. Next. There it is again. You can see where the water, they had a flume that got water to it and had water power. Next. And there it is, the portal buildings. You can still see the portal. Today they got it blocked off, though. Roosevelt Mine. Next. This is, as you come into Pitkin, this is the Pitkin Stamp Mill. Now, a stamp mill means that you got 10 big stamps. And when 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9 are going down, crashing into the ore in the bin, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 are going up. So it resembles pistons in an automobile going up and down, smashing ore into a finer substance. Next. There's a better shot of it. Now you can still see the remains out of it just as you come into Pitkin from Ohio City. Next. Fairview Mine, up Armstrong Gulch, 13,200 feet. Next. These are the citizen mine workers up at 13,000 feet working at the Fairview. Next. And there it is again. They got a Forest Service building up there to look for fires, and that thing's been scarred so much by lightning, it's unbelievable. And they've restored it. Next. This is a 8-horse team bringing in a boiler over one of the passes into Pitkin. Next. Pitkin, Colorado, 1882. Looking west, looking south. Next. There's City Hall. Looks a little different today. That's probably in the 1960s by the automobile that's there. Next. This is the Pitkin baseball diamond, which was right out where the Silver Plume is today. Got stands and everything. The field does not look in great shape. Next. There they are again. They played a lot of baseball. That was a big sport between the different mining towns. Next. Pitkin Bank. Banknote in the 1890s. Next. This is at Quartz, and this is a big coal train heading up towards the Alpine Tunnel, about 3 miles out of here at the town of Quartz. Next. That is how you got lumber up to the mines. These are burros. They are called Rocky Mountain Canaries because when they are overloaded, they would sit down and not move and emit a shrill whistle, which reminded miners of a canary. Hence the name Rocky Mountain Canaries. Without those little animals, none of these areas would ever have opened up. And a guy named Dave Smith from Lake City has written a fantastic book called On the Backs of Burros. Next. This is Pitkin very early with a 6-horse team and a wagon. Don't know where they're going, but that's Mills and Lumber. Mills and Johnson, hardware, iron and steel, stoves, tinware. Next. That's still there. For sale, I guess. Pitkin Depot, South Park Railroad. Next. Pitkin School, 1884. I can tell you, the children were well behaved. If they were not, they got a switch. And they went into the cloakroom dark for 1 hour. And when they got home, like my mother and father, they would say, "You're going to get twice as bad now." Next. Mrs. Rufus Knopp, K-N-O-P-P, Pitkin, 1913. I wouldn't want to mess with her. Next. Pitkin Parlin Mail Stage. Meets Denver and Rio Grande westbound at Parlin every day. Stage leaves Pitkin 7 a.m. Arrives at Parlin 10 a.m. Next. There's the Bonton. There's where we are today. 1904. And what a great job the Taylors have done in restoring this. Let's give them a nice round of applause. Next, Pitkin Bank. Next. This is early day photo Pitkin, as it says, heading up Armstrong Gulch, probably at a Fairview mine. And you can see horses were very, very important in those days. Next. This is a train heading up towards the Alpine Tunnel with a lot of snow. Next. There is a big coal train heading up for the Alpine Tunnel. A lot of times they had 2 or 3 engines because they couldn't really make that last pitch towards the tunnel. Next. Pitkin again very early. Next. Pitkin taken from the south end of town. 1885. Next. Whispering Bill. Pitkin, 1886. He got hurt in the mine, so whenever he talked, it was kind of like a whisper. Next. Pitkin, looking from the south. You can see the big stamp mill on the left. Next. Billy Reese's Saloon. Billy is the guy with the kid on his lap right on the right side of the door. Next. Great shot of Pitkin looking west. Commercial Hotel, one of the first big ones in Pitkin, you can see in the left corner. Next. Pitkin again. No, take that back. St. Elmo. St. Elmo was on the east side of the divide. So when you came up Chalk Creek, Alpine, Hancock, St. Elmo. Next. Pitkin, that is the Hancock Depot on the east side of the Continental Divide. Next. This is coming out of the east side of the Alpine Tunnel. You can see the shed. Next. East side, Alpine Tunnel. See the shed again. Next. East side, Alpine Tunnel, heading down Chalk Creek towards Hancock and St. Elmo and Romley and Alpine. Next. This is coming out of the west side of the Alpine Tunnel. You can see the tunnel there in the distance. Next. West side Alpine Tunnel. That's the telegraph office and one of the buildings that was used by the head man. Next. There is the machine shed. That's where they worked on the rail cars at the west side of the Alpine Tunnel. Next. West side Alpine Tunnel. Next. Palisades. 450 feet long, 50 feet up and down, 2.5 feet wide. Held the mountain in. Had a big slide in there about 5 or 6 years ago. Road is now open almost to the tunnel, but they got a big rock preventing you to get there. But you can walk the rest of the way. One of the most famous pieces of railroading in the United States. Next. That is 1964. John Carnahan, my graduate student, and I are where the slide came down 1/3 from the east side of the Alpine Tunnel. And now you can see why you got to have hip boots on and carbide lamp. You can't do that today. It's closed off on both ends. Next. St. Elmo again. Next. Placer Mining. Taylor Park. Sluice Box. Free Gold. Looking for the shot wire grain flour nugget and dust. Next. This is Spring Creek Pass between Spring Creek and Taylor Park, and that is Adam Murdy and his family. The Taylor Park Trading Post, Sherman Craner, bought that land from Adam Murdy. This is 1880. Next. Miners getting ready to go out to pan at Cottonwood Junction, right where Cottonwood Creek comes into the Taylor River. Next. This is, Dave McLean, I want you to pay attention, Union Park Cow Camp. Look familiar, Dave? All right. Next. There's the Taylor Park Cattle Pool. Dave will probably remember some of those names. Early 1920s. A lot of great ranching names there. Next. This is a boiler being brought in to Taylor Park with a 6-horse team. Usually they brought it in piece by piece. Next. Taylor Park. A guy named Brown. He's got a toboggan and the horse on a packed out track. A guy named Carl Foster sent me that photo, and it says, will Brown get off the track? Not if he's smart, because if he's smart, he's going to go up to his neck probably in snow. He's taking the mail in. Next. This is on top of Taylor Pass between Aspen and the north part of Taylor Park in the year 1899, and you can see that some of the cabins in the background are almost covered up with snow. Next. There's a boiler coming in with an 8-horse team or a 12-horse team over Tin Cup Pass into Tin Cup. Next. Before the Taylor Reservoir went in, there were about 2,200 acres of rich farmland, and a lot of ranchers made great hay in Taylor Park. And there they are around the year 1900. Next. Dorchester Cabin, north end of Taylor Park. Next. There is Dorchester, right along the mail route going to Aspen in the 1880s. Next. Building a road in Taylor Park. You can see it a little tougher in those days than it is today. Next. Star Mine, located up Italian Creek out of Dorchester, one of the great mines of Taylor Park. Next. West Gold Hill Mining Company. This is just south of Tin Cup. Now, if you look below, that's the Brunswick Mill. On top is the mine opening. That is a gravity tram. The full ore cars loaded with 600 pounds of ore per car coming down are pulling the empty ore cars going up. Gravity tram. Don't need any power. Next. There is the pie plant tram. Now down below, they got a 200-foot long, 50-foot wide mill run by electric power right on the bottom of Pie Plant Creek. And those are one of those ore buckets that carried 600 pounds, gravity tram. Next. A very wasteful way of mining. That is the Abbeville Dredge, 2 miles north of Tin Cup at a town called Abbeville. It's a floating mill, and it dug up the stream bed 30 feet deep, trying to find gold, silver, lead, zinc, copper, and then kicked the excess out to the side. You can still see the excess. When you go through Fairplay today, they had the same operation. And all that gravel you see on the side of the South Platte River, that was the excess from the dredge. Next. Hotel Rom, White Pine, 1882. I take that back. Tin Cup, 1882. Next. July 4th, 1896. People are having a little vacation along the Taylor River. Next. Gypsies along the Taylor River. You had to watch your money and watch everything else when the gypsies came in. But they would play, they were good musicians. Next. This is a railroad car out of Hancock. You can't see the rotary blade in the front, kicking off the snow. That's a Jull plow, and it's not a rotary. It's actually an auger. Next. Mirror Lake, off Tin Cup Pass, heading towards Tin Cup. Next. Mr. and Mrs. Carl Bergman, North Star, right outside of White Pine. Skis, 14 feet long. Guide pole, 7 feet long. Next. Lily Lake, out of Tin Cup, 1880s. Next. Tin Cup, 1908. I got some of these photos from a guy named Carl Foster. Got a letter in the mail, 1978, with a box. Carl Foster, Chatham, Massachusetts. Said I was a mining engineer at the Enterprise Mine, 1908 to 1914. Heard you're working on the book. Carl Foster sent me these photos. He said, I'm 89 years old and I failed quite a bit the past year. I think he passed away the next year. I wish I could have talked to him. More about him in a moment. Next. Tin Cup Town Hall, 1903. Bad condition. It's very nice today. Next. Tin Cup, 1946, over the bridge. Next. Frenchie's Saloon, Tin Cup, 1900. Destroyed by fire, 1907. Rebuilt. You can still go to Frenchie's today. Next. Tin Cup, 1905. Next. Tin Cup, 1905. 3,000 people. One great mine after another. Next. Uley Shears, a trapper, bootlegger. Whenever anybody wanted some booze, they put up a white flag. Uley would take it down, put it in a rotten stump on Red Mountain Creek. Then they'd get their booze. He always allowed himself to get arrested around November so he could spend the rest of the winter in jail with 3 hot meals a day and a good warm place to stay. When they arrested him one day, they said, is this your liquor? He said, don't know unless I taste it. The Crested Butte Ski area had a lift on the Twister lift, little cabin. Diane Muller, one of the owners, said, give me about 5 cabins that were owned by old-timers in the Gunnison country, and I gave her Uley Shears' cabin, and today it's called Uley's Cabin. Next. Taylor River going through the Taylor Dam before there was a Taylor Dam. All of that land is irrigated. Hay meadows. Next. There's the bridge over the dam. About 1930, Model A going over. Next. Now these guys made it to the dam in 1934, but then a slide came down. It comes down that usual spot today off Park Cone. They're going to have to do a hell of a lot of digging to get through and back to Almont. Next. Building the dam. 1935 to 37. Next. Building the dam. Next. 5 international trucks, brand new, 1936, building the dam. Next. That is the diversion tunnel that they used to divert the Taylor River out of the Taylor Dam area so they could back it up. Next. getting close. The dam will be 168 feet high, built on a geological fault. Next. Getting closer. You see the water being dammed up behind it. Next. There are the construction dormitories, 9 of them, housing 300 men. Newspaper accounts said even in July, in the morning, they huddled around to stay warm. They made $2.75 to $3 a day. Next. There it is. Now that spillway is on the left. 1963, I get up here, 2 guys in a rowboat get too close to the spillway, go over the spillway, down with about 6 inches of water, all the way down to the bottom of the dam, coming down about 30 miles an hour. Not a drop of water in the boat, neither guy got hurt. Next. There it is, completed dam. There's the spillway they went over on the right. Next. That, ladies and gentlemen, is water coming out of there at 100 miles an hour. Micro shrimp are killed. The biggest fish in Colorado hang out down below in a big pool of water. Some have been estimated, trout, at 44 pounds. All they do is eat micro shrimp, and nobody can fish there because it's federal. They get you caught fishing there, 10 years in a slammer, and probably a $10,000 fine from Homeland Security. I think that's the last one, is it? Yes, it is. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Are there any questions that anybody has? If not, don't worry about it. I hope everybody could see. Let's thank the Taylors again for hosting.